is Beth Hedva, and I wrote a book called Journey from Betrayal to Trust a few years ago. And it occurred to me after the book was out, and I've been kind of living with it and working with the material even more, that there were some chapters that were not in the book. The way the book is written is it moves all the way from personal betrayal wounds to societal betrayal wounds to even planetary betrayal wounds, and looking at the experience of betrayal as an initiation of the soul that moves us through a rite of passage if we know how to pass through the experience of death, symbolic death, so that we can then renew ourselves, rebirth ourselves. So as I was doing this, it occurred to me that there was no chapter on forgiveness, for example, which as I began, actually I realized this throughout, many people think of betrayal and forgiveness immediately together. But most of us haven't the faintest idea what forgiveness is. I like what James Hillman says about it. He says that forgiving is not forgetting. It's the remembrance of the wrong within a wider context. And the biggest piece is, how do we remember? Not remember just with our present experience and our rationalizations of why this happened to me, which we will explain based usually on all of our previous wounds and how we set ourselves up for it again. Rather, we need to get a wider and larger perspective. One of the things about the experience of betrayal is that it brings us into a depth of soul that is so profound, so intense. Anybody here ever feel betrayed? I figured that could be a part of why you might have shown up here today. So the experience of betrayal, as you know, there's nothing quite like it to bring you to the depths of experience, to a well that is so deep that we barely can find the bottom. That experience requires us to discover a new way through. In ancient Egypt, it said that there are two distinct paths in life. One, as they say, is the path of initiation. And the other is, what's that symbol?
The other is what?
No, one.
The other is what?
Pardon me?
The other is what? I got distracted.
One is the path of initiation, and the other isn't. So basically, you have two choices in life: path of initiation or not. Now, I have to say that in ancient Egypt, you didn't get extra credit if you're on the path of initiation. And pretty soon you'll see why. Because the path that isn't the path of initiation is a beautiful, lovely, simple path. You wake up in the morning, do your work all day long, and in the darkness of night, you go to sleep. To wake up again and work all day long, and at night, go to sleep again. Now, on the path that's the path of initiation, you also wake up, do your work all day long, but in the darkness of night, there are questions which plague your soul, which will not let you sleep. Anybody experience that? So what happens is, on the path of initiation, only those who are called to it follow it. Because in the journey, you eventually learn to stay up all day long doing your work, and all night long until an inner light dawns and guides you through the dark night of the soul. Now, according to cross-cultural rites of initiation, there are 5 stages in initiatory rites of passage. And I've given you a little map of that so that you can perhaps find where you are in your journey. The first stage is separation. You experience isolation, alienation, feeling cut off from everything that you were familiar with. It is always a shock when we experience the shock of separation. And betrayal, as you all well know, delivers quite a shock. The second stage in rites of passage is the beginning of tests and trials of the soul, rites of purification. Now, in the Betrayal to Trust journey of the soul, we go through what I call emotional ordeals. And we'll be getting into those in a little bit. The third stage is those emotional ordeals, or the ordeals of initiation, purify us so that we can release ourselves from the past completely. In fact, we we are required to do so. In that process, we then are moved into an experience of symbolic death, where there is the releasing of everything which would block us from being able to go forward. Now, this is the part that's very tricky. In initiatory rites of passage, the next stage is where you get to speak with a teacher, a wise one, who understands how to get value and meaning out of the experience you went through, who can help you understand your journey, your initiatory ordeals. In ancient Egypt, they said basically that not only once you were an initiate, and you went to the temple to get the teachings, but when you got there were two levels of teachings. One was the outer level teaching, the other is the inner level teaching. The outer level teaching is taught by outer teachers in outer temples. And you would go and speak with the teacher and discover what is the meaning, the value, the purpose of these questions which have been plaguing your soul. And in ancient Egypt, they taught how absolutely everything in the physical world is a representation of spirit, and how every physical experience, every physical object, every physical person, everything in the material world itself is alive with the principles of spirit. And you would learn those principles from that perspective. Now, in the inner temple, not every initiate made it there. And the reason is, there was no outer temple to go to, because the inner temple was ruled by the goddess Ma'at. And the goddess Ma'at was the goddess of truth and justice. She was the goddess who weighed your heart in the halls of the double Ma'at, the hall of two truths. And in that hall of two truths, where your heart is weighed, only the truth in your own heart can guide you. In ancient Egypt, it said that when your heart is weighed on the scales of Ma'at, in order to go forward, your heart must weigh as light as a single feather. How does your heart feel after betrayal? Not too light. The challenge with the betrayal to trust experience is there are no outer teachers who can tell us why you went through what you went through. Only until you discover the truth in your own heart, a truth which lightens your heart, which releases you from the pain, are you then able to go forward. This is where the experience of trust comes in. To trust the process. Now, before I go forward, I thought what I would do is let you take a moment. And I have a couple more guidelines here. We've just now talked about the new knowledge experience. Okay? In this trust that you discover in yourself, in this truth within your own being, that leads to the fifth stage of initiation. That stage being the rebirth of who you truly are. What's truly important to you. What matters to you. What your purpose is in life. And you recommit to that. In the recommitting to that, you move forward into the fifth stage, which is renewal and rebirth. And this is the part that's so valuable in cross-cultural rites of initiation, which we don't completely have in traditional psychology. Where after our soul renewal, we then return to our communities, no longer cut off from them. We return with a new sense of self, and a self that actually re-enters the community with a new gift to give, based on who we are now. And this gift that we give to our families, to our workplace, to society, to our community, empowers not only us, but embedders the entire community. This is the full circle of the betrayal to trust initiation. And so it is because of this that I've come to understand that betrayal experiences and the experience of betrayal is for giving us an opportunity to come to know ourselves much better. So with this concept of forgiving and forgiveness, it is not something that we need to get from someone else or give to someone else. However, when we have received it from within ourselves, it naturally flows from us as compassion, as insight, as understanding. And as we go through the workshop today, I think you'll have more of a sense of how that is not only theoretically, but hopefully through results as well. So what I'd like you to do is just take a few minutes to fill out this little questionnaire. This is something that can help you identify what stage of the process you are on. I'm going to sing a song, and when you're done, join me in the song so that we can all end up in the same place at the same time. Return to the land of your soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of the soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of the soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of the soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of the soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to the land of the soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to where you are. Return to where you were born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of the soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of the soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return. Join me if you're done writing. Return again. Return to the land of the soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of the soul. So now what I'd like you to do is take what you just wrote and put it either under your chair or under your seat, because that's where we usually go as we go into the unconscious with wherever we are. And that's a really important piece, because no matter where we are as it goes into the unconscious, there's a seed in there. There's a quest in our hearts that's seeking insight, understanding, purpose, value, meaning. And that seed, that desire, as it goes into the conscious, begins to work then unconsciously, gathering data, gathering information, gathering together all of the pieces, until then it comes forward again and brings us that inner light which dawns and guides our way through the dark night of the soul, through the journey of initiation. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the style or how we're going to work here today. I'm going to spend probably the first 45 minutes to hour storytelling and delivering information. And then the last half hour or so having more of a dialogue discussion with whatever it is that's under us. There is an inner process that I've developed that will help assist you in awakening your inner vision, your ability to see, hear, and feel or know, so that you can understand in a new way. There's a wonderful, wonderful story on forgiveness that I like to tell. It's an old English story, actually it's an old Scottish story. And the title of this story is called The Language of Birds. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that story. It is a fabulous, fabulous story. And the story, as happens frequently in mythic stories or fairy tales, is that the ancient teachings of the initiatory process are encoded in the tales. So this is a story for initiates, and soon you'll hear how that goes in the pattern. This is the story of a man named Alistair. He's the son of an old knight in France, and his father wants to give him the best education possible. And so his father sends him to the Isle of Birds, where he's to learn the language of birds. And his father sends him there for a whole year and a whole day. Whenever we have these kind of annual cycles plus, we know that we've entered into an initiatory process. So Alistair comes back from the Isle of Birds, greets his father, and his father says to him, "So tell me, how have I profited by thee? What have you learned in the Isle of the Birds?" And Alistair says, "Well, I can now see a thing." And his father says, "Is that all I get after sending you there for an entire year? I'll send you back again, and perhaps by next year we'll have more to profit by." So he sends Alistair back to the Isle of Birds for another year and another day. And Alistair returns, and his father says, "So tell me, son, how can I profit by thee now?" And Alistair says, "Well, now I can see a thing, and I can hear a thing." And his father says, "What good is that? I'll send you back for a third year." He sends him back for a third year, and after the third year, he returns to his father and says, of course with the famous question, "How can I profit from all of this that I sent and invested in you?" And Alistair says, "Ah, father, now I can see a thing, and I can hear a thing, and I understand." And so it so happened at that time that there was this little finch coming in and tweeting all over the castle. And the father said, "Well, tell me then, what is this bird saying?" And Alistair said, "Oh, it's nothing. It's not really saying anything at all. You don't really want to hear that." He said, "After sending you there for 3 years, I deserve at least this." And Alistair said, "Well, if you really want to know, the finch is saying that you shall someday be kneeling before me, and mother will be serving me with a wash basin." And his father, do I need to even tell you, was infuriated. "What kind of gratitude is this? If this is the case, then off with you." And he sent off his foster brothers to kill Alistair. But Alistair's foster brothers couldn't quite do that. So they each took a piece of their own clothing and exchanged with Alistair and sent Alistair back to the Isle of the Birds. They brought the clothing home to his father and were certain then that Alistair was dead. Well, Alistair stayed on the Isle of Birds for another 3 years, only this time without provisions, and he ate every single bird on the isle just to stay alive. And in the course of that, he became all ugly and hairy and very, very horrid to look at, with nails growing. And off in the distance, when a ship was coming, he waved to the ship. And the sea captain looked out and said, "Well, it looks like it's human." How many of us have felt like Alistair after we've been betrayed? Horrid and less than human. However, the sea captain recognized his humanness and went and picked him up and said, "Tell me, how is it that you have come to be here?" He said, "Well, have you done some horrible crime?" And he said, "No, I was just left here, and now I have no family." And the sea captain said, "I have always wanted a son. Come with me to my wife, and we will adopt you as our own." And so they returned to France, and his wife was overjoyed when the sea captain said, "I have this son that I forgot to tell you about, and I'm bringing him home now." And his wife then said at that moment, "Well, let me tell you, there has been a story in the kingdom how there have been 3 ravens who have been keeping the king up at night with all their squawking and squawking and squawking. And the king has said that whoever can make the ravens stop shall have half the kingdom and his daughter's hand in marriage." Well, Alistair said to his newfound parents, "I can solve this problem for you, and you will never be in want again. And so Alistair went to the palace and got in writing from the king that indeed, if he was able to give the answer to why the birds were squawking, that in fact the king would give him half his kingdom and his daughter's hand in marriage. And it so turned out that 3 years prior, there had been a famine in the land. And as Alistair heard the birds squawking and began to dialogue with them, the story was this. During the famine, the mother bird was sitting on a nest of 3 eggs. But she could not even sustain herself to stay there longer, so she talked with her husband and said, "We must fly away and return when we are able." And off she flew. And the husband raven said, "No, no, we can't do that." And he stayed on the eggs himself. And one egg hatched, and the next egg, a little chick hatched and died. And so he flew off with the one that was left. And after 3 years, they returned, and the mother raven sat on to hatch the last egg, but it also hatched and died. And so they were coming to see who had the right to the chick. Child custody started a long time ago. And the king was deciding, did the father have the right or the mother have the right? Just as a side note, this is a little bit of the change in times about the politics between matriarchy and patriarchy. That's a story for another time. So Alistair told the story that it was up to the king to tell what decision was to be made, what was justice here. And the king said, "What should I do?" And Alistair said, "Ah, sire, it is for you to give justice, not me." Very wise. How many of us, once we can see a thing, hear a thing, and understand a thing, want to tell everybody what to do? However, not Alistair. And so it was that the king made his judgment. And the birds flew away. And after the king was certain that the birds were not to return, he gave Alistair his daughter in marriage and half the kingdom. However, there was talking about the castle, that who is this man? How can we say that he is of noble birth? And so it was decided that he would be sent to spend some time with the king of manners, to learn how to be in court. And off he was, and I should say during this time, that his wife would have nothing to do with him. How many of us have experienced also relationship beloved betrayals, in addition to parental betrayals? So it was that Alistair, off with the king of manners, was there with 2 other princes, the Prince of Spain and the Prince of Greece. And I should also mention it was during this time that the king died, and Alistair actually became king of France. Now, it so happens that the Prince of Spain fell in love with the king of manners' daughter, the Princess of Manners. And because Alistair was already married, it was known that he would not be wooing her. So Alistair acted as the go-between between the Prince of Spain and the Princess of Manners. Now, the Prince of Greece got very jealous about this and told the king of manners, that the prince was wooing his daughter. So it so happened then that Alistair not only served the favor of being the go-between, but took up the challenge for the Prince of Spain and fought for the Prince of Spain and his honor. Because the king decided, as happened in those days, that through a jousting or some kind of to-the-death sort of battle, whoever was the liar would die or be injured. It so happened then, because Alistair was indeed telling the truth, that he was able to injure the Prince of Greece. And with that, the Prince of Greece went off. And the Prince of Spain went back to Spain, eventually married the Princess of Manners. Alistair went back to his kingdom, King of France. However, when he got there, his wife was very, very unhappy with him. And she began to, at the bequest of others in the castle, began to poison him. And in his eating food that was poisoned, all of his hair fell out. Hair is consciousness in fairy tales. It's connected to the head. How many have lost our minds, lost our consciousness when we have felt unloved by our beloved? Anybody here? And he became hideous yet again and ugly. And he was laughed out of France, and off he went, looking less than himself. And he made his way off again, finding his way to Spain. And there he is in Spain, knocking on the gates of the Prince of Spain and his wife, the princess, finds his way into their audience, but needless to say, they cannot recognize him because he looks so horrid. But he takes his ring, drops it in the cup at the bottom of the cup. When the princess finishes her wine, she finds it and says, "Where did you get this?" And she said, Alistair said, "I got it from you." And she said, "Ah, it must be you then, Alistair." And the Princess of Spain brought Alistair before the Prince of Spain, and they vowed that they would do anything they could to help him restore himself and his kingdom. Now, I should say during this time, it so happens that the Queen of France married again, and there's now another king in France, and Alistair is totally usurped. Well, Alistair goes to sleep in the castle, and the Prince of Spain that night has a dream. And he has a dream which is, if he cuts the heads of his 3 children and bathes Alistair in the blood of his children, Alistair will be returned. So he goes in, now it's a fairy tale, bear with me for a moment. Alistair goes in, the Prince of Spain goes into the room of his children in the morning, cuts their throats, takes their blood, washes Alistair, and is returned to himself. Then he goes out and talks to his wife, the Princess of Manners, and says, "Tell me, my dear, what would you do for Alistair to be returned to himself?" And she says, "Anything, with the exception of losing you, my beloved." And he said, "Would you even sacrifice our children?" And she said, "Yes, even our children, so I would sacrifice." And so they go back in and see Alistair sitting with the children, and the children have necklaces on now, playing with each other and with Alistair. Fairy tales are nice that way. However, there's a deeper message here. How many of us have had to confront major taboos to come back to our true selves? How many of us have had to discover not what it was that the society wanted from us, not what it is that our family wants from us, but what is the truth of who we are, so that we can indeed be ourselves? This is the secret teaching in this great sacrifice. How many of us have had to make great sacrifices to come back to ourselves? And so it is now that Alistair, to make a long story short, and the King of Spain, the Prince of Spain, returned to France. And the Prince of Spain raises an army and wins back France for Alistair. The next piece of the story moves to this. Alistair is going through the woods, going through the countryside, and comes upon an old castle as he's touring his land now. King of France returned, honored by all the people. And as he comes on this one crumpled, dilapidated castle, he recognizes that it was the castle of his old father. And he goes in and knocks on the door, and his father must receive him and give him hospitality. And he has a meager board in his father's castle, wakes up in the morning, and his father humbles himself before him, saying, "Oh, sire, I have not been able to give you anything what I once could, for I am now a poor man." And Alistair asks, "So how is it that you come this way? Have you no children?" He says, "Ah, no. I had a son once, but he's dead now." And just as Alistair is getting his boots on, he can't quite get the latchet done. And so the old knight bends down and unties the latchet with his teeth, just as Alistair's old mother walks in with the wash basin. And at that moment, Alistair pops up and says, "Ah, mother, father, stand up. The prophecy of the finch has been fulfilled." And his father stands up and goes, "Oh my, is it true that you are Alistair, my son? I thought you did. Certainly now you must wish to kill me for what I have done to you." And Alistair, who could see a thing and hear and understand, said, "Ah, Father, if it were not for you and all that I have been through, who could say if I would be king today?" This to me is a story of forgiveness. Betrayal experiences are forgiving us an opportunity to see in a new way, to hear the voice of our soul calling out to us, to understand with a whole being a truth which sets us free. I'd like to describe just a little bit about the emotional ordeals that we go through when we experience betrayal. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this. This comes from the work of a man named James Hillman, and he wrote a wonderful little article on betrayal. The first experience is righteous resentment. Anybody ever experienced? Now, usually we don't just express that, we kind of hold it in. And it festers. And then we begin to desire that the person who hurt us hurt too. In fact, we want them to hurt at least as much as us. Or maybe a little more. That would be okay too. That leads to a desire for vengeance. Usually we act this out by withdrawing ourselves from their presence. This experience of withdrawal, though, does not necessarily resolve. And as I said, separation is the first step of initiation. But if we're separating ourselves out to hurt another versus saying, "Wow, I am going through so much right now. I need to come back to myself before I can talk with you about this. There is so much that's going on for me. I don't even know my own heart or my own feeling or my own mind right now." That's a different kind of separation. The next stage is, if we haven't done this good communication, which most of the time we don't, if we haven't already learned to see, hear, and understand ourselves and our needs, we then will begin to see only the negative in our betrayer. Where once they were kind and sweet, or supportive, or the best job in the world, whatever it is. Now, they're the worst person in the world. They never understood. They're inconsiderate. This place just stifles my growth. Who needs it anyway? Okay? The projection of the shadow is a challenge to the soul to release attachment to outcome. Much easier said than done. It is a challenge to the soul in that releasing the righteousness to come to understand both the positive and the negative in ourselves and each other. This is the phase that we call owning the shadow. It is the pivotal point in doing the inner work. The next stage is we begin to generalize that negative where once they were cruel and now they're the worst person, they never listened, they lied to me. How could they do this to me? We have it all figured out here. We take that negative piece and we begin to generalize it to all others deemed to be just like our betrayer. All men, all women. Anybody ever think that? Oh, men, you know, that's just how they are. Women, they're so flighty, unpredictable, emotional. We generalize whatever it was that was challenging for us in our relationship, put it out onto all others. We become cynical at this phase and stage. And the cynicism leads to what I consider to be one of the greatest challenges, which is self-betrayal, where we no longer believe in the dreams that are most important to us. We no longer listen to ourselves and our own hearts. Or if we do listen, we no longer act on it because we don't think it's worthwhile anyway. It's futile. What difference will it make? Self-betrayal is one of those other chapters that I wish I had written because it is truly at the core of most betrayal experiences. How is it that we betray ourselves? And when I say self here, I'd like to say Angie Arian talks about basically one core fear in life, which is the fear of loss of self. And that fear of loss of self is usually expressed either through a fear of abandonment or a fear of engulfment. I'm sure you've heard of this kind of experience of the people who are afraid of being subsumed or smothered, or the people who are afraid of being rejected or abandoned. And so out of those two fears we'll then abandon the self. But in the ancient mystery schools they said that the fear of loss of self is actually a fear of separation from true self, the sacred, holy self, which is all, which is the divine. And that it's that experience of separation that we're really seeking to heal through the experience of betrayal and trust. So here we are, we've betrayed our ideals, our principles, our dreams, whatever it is that is giving us a sense of meaning or purpose in life. And since we can't believe that that's going to be fulfilled, we move into the fifth stage, which is fear of future betrayals. Anybody afraid of future betrayals? Oh my God, the next person I go out with, if I'm single and recently divorced, better not, and we give our laundry list. That laundry list leads to the creating of contracts and agreements rather than a sense of trust that whatever comes, we'll deal with it, whatever it may be. The suspicion, the fear, the paranoia. Now I'd like to rewind back to the generalization because I think that this is another core piece that frequently gets overlooked. When we generalize and project our personal hurt out onto groups of people, and then we betray ourselves, our basic humanity, and we begin to try and control and manipulate others, we have the foundation for racism, classism, all of the atrocities that begin to happen at a societal level, not just at a personal level. And so the challenge for us, as we begin to work out in society as well, is to see that a lot of the woes and wounds in society are the result of unhealed betrayal wounds that have been passed on now for generations upon generations upon generations. As each individual can return, as you can see, through going through a symbolic death. And this is the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with that work, the denial, the anger, rationalization, depression, until we finally come to acceptance. At first, the denial is that form of, why do I have to deal with this? Or it can be like, this happened 20 years ago, I shouldn't have to deal with this anymore. Or the timing on this is bad, I'm just going to go forward and pretend it didn't happen. There are many forms of denial when we experience the shock of betrayal. However, more often than not, we go right on into the anger and the rationalization, which creates all of those rites of purification, the emotional ordeals that I described. That will eventually lead to an awareness that no matter how we try to rationalize it or explain it or justify it or try to work it out with the person, they've already made up their mind about how it is. They're going to move on, with or without us. Likewise, not only have we lost them, we've lost ourselves. This is very depressing. And it's in this phase that we begin to hear words like, God, I am so tired of this. When is this going to end? Anybody ever thinking that? It's a good sign. When you hit that place, there's a depth of soul that you've begun to touch. What I have come to understand the death phase is about is it's helping us actually come to accept ourselves, accept our range of experience, which most of us have been told is not okay to experience. Whether it's our anger, whether it's our tears, whatever the experience is. In that self-acceptance, it then leads to acceptance of what happened, which is not the same as condoning what happened. And this is very important. Frequently, for us who've experienced betrayal wounds, it's hard for us to accept the fact that we are being moved forward because we don't like how we were being moved forward. And so we will have a way of getting stuck on it should be done differently. That will take us right back to rationalization. I need to say that betrayal, if it wasn't done that way, it wouldn't have been a betrayal. It's hard for us to come to understand that the experience of betrayal exists. And this is the thing that was so remarkable to me as I began to work with this. I began to understand that we're really up against a major archetype here. In my book, in each chapter, I look at different betrayal wounds as presenting us with different soul lessons, different tests and different teachings. So mother betrayal wounds injure our sense of self-esteem and knowing. And the challenge then is to rediscover an inner source of knowing. Let's face it, every single one of us, in our hearts of hearts, knows what love is and what love isn't. In our heart of hearts, we know what we need to feel nourished, to feel supported. We know better than absolutely anybody else when you get right down to it. And if you look outside of yourself, and this is what I began to understand, is that our mothers are required, almost as a biological imperative, to stop mothering us at some point. Now, some of our mothers do it in utero. They didn't want this baby anyway, okay? And that's experienced as a betrayal. Some of our mothers will go so far as to wean us, but then that's it. They can't handle toddlers at all. The terrible twos were terrible for them, and they take it out on the 2-year-old. Whatever it may be, the experience of that all-nurturing, all-loving source is not a physical human being. It is an experience of consciousness that resides within us. And if we continue to project it out onto our primary caregiver, we rob ourselves of the discovery of knowing that within. So I began to understand that, gosh, this is pretty fascinating stuff. Through the betrayal, we discover it inside. Father betrayal wounds are an injury to our sense of direction and purpose in life. An injury to our ability to act for ourselves in the direction of our path. And the challenge then is to discover self-direction, self-empowerment. Relationship betrayal wounds are an injury to our relationship between self and self. We do grow up beyond the mother-father-child relationship. Imagine, if you will, that we eventually do unify with a source of nurturance and a source of direction which guides us in the world. We are whole that way. And I need to say that the source of direction, the sense of direction, tells us what is right, but not in a moral sense. This is right, this is wrong. How many of us experience that with the archetype of the father as it projected out onto our personal fathers and authorities in our lives? Externally, it will look moral. Internally, though, it is the opening and awakening of an inner knowing of a sense of direction that is based on our intuition, our intuitive reason, rather than only our rational capacity to reason. Body betrayal wounds awaken for us the requirement to surrender, to accept the limits of this form, and within these limits to discover tremendous creativity. There's nothing that is more inspiring than someone who has been able to come to learn what the mystery teaching is of the limitations they live with, and then within those limits to be a model of how to continue to let the spirit of who they are shine through. And there are so many stories of people who have suffered physical ailments or, gosh, disease, accident, sterility. There are so many examples that come to mind. Now the thing is, in societal betrayal wounds, we begin to project our personal mother, our personal father, our limits, our need for cooperation and connection, all out onto others. How many of us have heard, our leaders have let us down? Those Democrats, those Republicans, they should be taking better care of us. It's not that they shouldn't. However, the requirement is for us to discover in ourselves that we are the bearers of that kind of care. And then to join together with like-minded others who share that value. And in that way, begin to create new structures in society that are more a reflection of this new way. And when I talk about new way, this is really moving forward into the rebirth phase. One of the things that was most striking for me is when we start dealing with collective betrayal wounds, we start also dealing with the archetype actually beginning to be acted out in collective ways so that the death is not always symbolic anymore. It's not always symbolic for us personally either. Their suicide rates are pretty high. All of those kinds of experiences. But in the collective, we end up seeing things like crime or the betrayal level of the planet. We end up seeing, or war, for example, or we start seeing nuclear accidents or waste and pollution. If we go into the belief that we are here to wreak vengeance because we're not getting our due, and we can't trust ourselves and we can't trust anybody else, and the only way to get what we need is to control and manipulate, to create a sense of safety, and we better get those contracts and agreements to ensure that we're safe. Doesn't this sound a little bit like our world? We can't help then but creating societal structures that will lead to death, symbolic as well as potentially literal death. But have no fear. Literally have no fear. What has been taught is that the death phase in the ancient mystery schools is the gateway to renewal and rebirth. How does this happen? It happens on an individual level as we begin to open our inner resources. Now the trust is, how do we open our inner resources? I've developed a little acronym, and this is something that you can kind of take with you just to use for yourself. There were so many days when I was developing this material about 10 years ago, I went through like every betrayal imaginable. It just was phenomenal to me how you get the personal level of research when you go, oh, this is an interesting idea, let me explore this. So I began actually using the TRUST as a little bit of a mantra, going, okay, what is it I need to do now? TRUST, and I go, R, release, relax, receive. Okay, that's what I need to do now. Okay. The T in trust stands for turn inward to discover your truth, instead of looking outside to who's going to tell you what's right or wrong for you. You're going to find people who will support absolutely every point of view you could possibly have, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be true. It certainly may not be the truth that's going to lighten your heart and allow you to move forward in a new way. The R in trust is once we've turned inward, how do we connect with ourselves, our deeper self? Well, of course, releasing righteousness is helpful, and releasing the tension and the fear in the body. And there are many, many ways, and all of us have ways that we help ourselves release. Relaxation, according to Dr. Nell Noddings at Stanford University, is actually the key to awakening our intuition and our inner resources, opening expanded states of consciousness. Relaxation is key to opening to expanded states of consciousness. And in that opening, we then contact a creative source. The more I've done this work, the more I've discovered that people open to relaxation, not just through massage and body work and taking long walks by the ocean and this kind of thing, all of that works, but also creative expression is phenomenal. Singing, dancing, making music, drawing, painting, getting back in touch with something that you're involved in, that you can lose yourself in it for a moment, and the creativity of it. Shazette Mihaly, who wrote the book on flow, talks about that experience of being in a sense of flow with whatever it is that you're doing. So note in your mind at least 3 to 5 things that you do to help yourself relax, to reconnect with your own creativity, that will help you release the obsession for a moment. And the mind that keeps going through the rationalizations. Even if you're drawing them out, at least it's coming out now in something creative that can move and lead into something else. After you've relaxed, then you can receive greater insight and awareness. That's when we do the U in trust. We use our inner resources and our wealth of outer resources to support us in gaining insight and understanding about that eternal question, why? Why am I going through this right now? Now, I would like to say it's very important when you ask yourself the question why, to ask yourself not specifically why, because that will engage the rational mind. Rather, ask yourself questions that continue to guide you and uplift you. Like, what can I learn from this? What is the pattern here? And is this a pattern that I'm ready to release? What will help me release this pattern? Where is that pattern being held most? In my body, in my feelings? What are the thoughts that are holding this pattern in place? And where does that come from? What will allow me to go forward with my dream? What is my dream? Perhaps I forgot. What is it that matters most to me? It's in this phase and stage that we discover frequently that our betrayer, we were expecting them to fulfill our dream for us. Okay, they blew it. They didn't do it. But it's our dream. Use your intuition to understand the dream of your soul, what it is that you deeply desire, what you care most about, what is most essential for you. Then do the S in trust. Speak what you know to be true. Take a stand on that dream. Commit to that. Be that. If you're wanting respect, respect yourself. And be an example of respect in relationship to others. That would be an example, which I've heard so frequently in the betrayal thing. You didn't respect me. She didn't respect what we said we were going to do. So, that's the one. I mean, it just happens to be pretty common, the issue. Respect. There are a few common themes. Lying, deceit, respect, lack of commitment. All of these mean being truthful with yourself. Releasing the illusions of expectation. Respecting what is most essential and valuable to yourself, and committing to yourself that you will live that in your life. That's the S and trust. Now, a funny thing happens. When we speak our truth and we start living our dreams and values, what happens? Do people go, wow, yeah? No, usually they will end up feeling betrayed. Aha! Interesting, huh? And you know what? You have betrayed them. You are no longer acting the way you used to act, which is their expectation. You have unwittingly entered into the role of initiator, which has moved them into an experience of separation, which will then begin their own spiraling and their own denial of you shouldn't be that way, and anger with you about it, right? And rationalizing with you about if you only do this, it'll be okay. And then getting really depressed when that doesn't happen, and crying, and whatever it is that happens. What do we do in the face of that? Do we get angry back? Do we start denying their truth and their experience, and etc.? If we do that, we slid right back into self-betrayal. Betrayal of our ideals. It's at that point that we do the final T in trust. We turn inward and try again to discover a deeper truth. Release, relax, receive even more. Use your insight and understanding to see, to hear, to feel, to understand. Just like Alistair. Even more. And then speak again. And it may be in all of the paragraphs of their feedback, there is a single little sentence or one little word of truth. Seek for that single spoken word of truth when you turn inward to discover for yourself, okay, this is what they're telling me. What is true for me? And how can I grow from this? And how can I be even more available to be the expression of my dreams, my commitment, what my soul is here to do and be? You can see that if we do this, we begin to give birth to ourselves. We begin to be in the world in a whole new way. Now, birth, I need to remind you all. Anybody here have a baby? Give physical birth? Any moms here? Any dads witnessing births? This, I think, is a little bit of why in our Western society this part is missing. It's because it's a very feminine archetype. But it is an archetype that is coming forward as we are birthing our society and our world again. And I need to say that the healing of our societal dream, our societal wounds, and our planetary wounds required the same thing that our personal healing does. On our personal level of healing, we must discover a personal dream that inspires us to live in the world in a new way. On the societal level, we must discover collective dreams that allow us as individuals to connect with a much larger dream and picture of society as a whole, where we as humanity are going. That's why it is that the betrayals in society are the gateway to the family of humanity. As we are then entering into literally a whole new world with a new vision of what is it to be human on this planet, no longer in our little tribal or national entities, but to be human beings on one world, one earth, And then we get to the earth with a dream and vision of Gaia, a living, breathing experience, of which we are a small, teeny, weeny, little piece. And to envision what is our place and our part in relationship to this world, and then to the universe. These are the dreams of the soul that will inspire us to come together as a collective in a whole new way. So the birthing process, what is it that we're giving birth to? Ourselves, humanity, a new way of being. And the way we do that is the first stage is insemination. We receive a glimpse of possibility and vision that fills our being. Then we move on to the experience of gestation. We hold that vision in the belly of our consciousness, frequently in the unconscious. Remember, you're all sitting on it right now. There is a dream in there that will inspire you to go forward and live in a new way. I should mention that it's during the gestation phase that we must be very careful with ourselves. We must open our intuition very carefully. Just like a pregnant woman has to follow her hunches and her cravings, gee, I feel like doing this, I don't feel like doing this. We have to really pay attention to what is it that will nourish and nurture our new self, our new dream. And it's up to us to give ourselves that. The third stage, though, no matter how good we are to ourselves, eventually there's the experience of a contraction. Labor begins. Now I need to say, just like denial, anger, rationalization, and acceptance is not depression and acceptance. It's not like you wait in line for a bus and you go through one and then the other. It's more like a pinball machine where they're all going off. In the birth of consciousness, the same is true. We go through gestation phases where we hold and nurture ourselves. We go through an experience also of contractions. In the birth of the self, it's a contraction in consciousness. A contraction to the old way of being versus, a new way of being. Old way, new way. Old way, new way. Sound familiar? There comes a point when we're flip-flopping back and forth between old and new so much, it gets so intense. This is called transition. In the birth of a baby, it's when the mother is saying, this is not happening. I'm done. I want to go home. This baby is too big. It's not coming out. In the birth of our consciousness, it is extreme self-doubt. Oh my God, I haven't grown at all. I've done all of this work and I'm still doing the same old stuff. It's at this point that we need to push for our new way of being. It's at this point we need to remember to breathe. Relax between contractions as much as possible. It's at this point we need to turn inward to discover the truth, release, relax, receive. Use your insight and understanding to speak your truth in a new way as much as possible. If you don't, no problem. You die. Right on back to denial, anger, rationalization, depression. But don't worry, having died at least once before, it gets easier. We wake up and go, oh right, here I am doing it again. Well, let's see. Where do I want to go from here? That's okay. Eventually we find that we are in the birth phase, which is actually in retrospect. We turn around and go, oh, look at this. I am doing things differently. So that each of the tests and trials then actually become a test of the soul and a deep soul teaching. Instead of the desire for vengeance, if we T-R-U-S-T, we learn to discover our truth for ourselves and express it with good communication skills. Instead of projecting the shadow out there, we begin instead to own the shadow. We begin to recognize that within us there is the experience of vulnerability, weakness, fear, as well as light, beauty, possibility. We begin to understand what was vulnerable in us that allowed us to be in a circumstance of what we call betrayal. And we develop compassion for ourselves, that we are but vulnerable, mere mortals. And in that opening of compassion for ourselves, we begin to actually have compassion for others. Because we begin to see that others, when they are acting out of their hurt, their pain, their fear, their anger, they're not really doing it solely to get us. It's not always intentional. In fact, it's an expression of their own hurt, which we know all too well because we have those same hurts inside. So the experience of compassion for the pain of the world opens. And then instead of generalizing the negative, if we T-R-U-S-T, instead of generalizing, we begin to understand the specific soul teaching. What is it my soul is requesting of me in this circumstance? What is the dream of my soul that I wish to fulfill? On the collective level, what is the dream of my people that I am an emissary for to bring forward into this world? What is the gift of my people? We begin to heal the bigotry, racism, and classism by being the gift, unique gift that each of us is. Instead of self-betrayal, then, we commit to being ourselves. Then we realize, instead of control, manipulation, contracts, and agreements, we are free to be ourselves. Completely free to be ourselves. Spiritual freedom is the gift of moving all the way through this experience. And you know, a remarkable thing dawns in consciousness at this point. If we are free to be ourselves, so is everybody else free to be themselves. Free to be at whatever stage of the journey they're on. Free to be on the path of initiation or not. Totally free. Before we move forward, I want to teach you how many of you are working with people here? I'm going to teach you a technique to work with yourself, of course, but also it's one that you can use to work with other people. This is material, unfortunately I don't have a map for this one, but perhaps someday I will. This is based on the acronym FORGIVE. The F in FORGIVE is about focus. Where we focus our attention makes a very big difference. The first step is to just focus on what's happening. Your thoughts, feelings, and experiences. This is called ordinary consciousness. We need to be where we are, wherever that is. However, we observe our ordinary consciousness. Ask yourself, as you're observing yourself, what are my feelings? What am I feeling in my body? Where is it being held? What are the thoughts associated with these experiences? Are there attitudes or beliefs that are holding this in place? Just observe thoughts, feelings, and experiences. At some point, we need to shift. And the way we shift is we make a request of our greater self. The R is request, the G is greater self. We request insight and understanding. I always say that the questions we ask guide our quest. I really suggest you don't ask questions like, how could I be so dumb or stupid? Because you'll get answers to questions like that. And they're not going to take you to greater awareness. They're going to take you up to those thoughts and feelings that have made the base assumption that you are dumb and stupid. You understand what I'm saying? We need to be very careful with what questions we ask. Ask questions that uplift, that gain perspective. Be like Alistair and see, hear, and understand from the level of the soul, from the level of the language of birds, birds which are free to fly high above the challenges and the pains of the earth, and so gain perspective on the whole story. In ancient Egypt, the image of the soul was called the Ba. It was a human-headed bird. It was the only image in Egypt that wasn't human on an animal body. All the rest were animal heads on human bodies, right? All the gods and goddesses. Why is that? Because this greater consciousness is an aspect of human consciousness that surmounts our animal self. Very, very important. We request of this greater self, or higher self, or higher power, or divine self, or cosmic consciousness, or holy sacred self. Whatever helps you really experience the difference. We open our inner ear, not just listening to the chattering, but the silent whispering voice of intuition. The I is intuition. We receive insight. Which then blends with our values and vision. Which allows us then to integrate our intuition into concrete, practical experience. Our values, our vision, how do you demonstrate the insight? That becomes the expression. So, what I'd like to do is a little guided piece about this one. This is a technique that I teach my clients, and I would like to share it with you. This is a little bit of a neuro-linguistic, actually it's a hypnotic technique that's called anchoring. They use it a lot in NLP, but this is particularly actually just in straight hypnosis. The idea is that you're going to anchor your ordinary consciousness in your right hand. And you can do some kind of a mudra, whether you want to do something like bringing your thumb and forefinger together, or thumb and middle finger, whatever is comfortable for you. And you're going to rest that in your lap. Then, at some point, you will let this go. When you request insight and information, you will let go of your ordinary consciousness and anchor greater awareness in your left hand. Left hand, the receptive. Allow yourself to receive insight, understanding, communication from your soul. Once you've received that insight and understanding, it's time to integrate. Literally envision, while holding still, what will this look like in your life, in your world, at work, at home? What actions can you take that will allow you to actually fulfill, assimilate, and experience this insight based on your values and vision? Then right hand, left hand together, express yourself. Ordinary consciousness now blended with intuitive insight. Visualizing the power of creative visualization to literally recreate our lives works on lots of levels. It works not only, as we know, basketball players who visualize do better in basketball, or Symington work where we heal our physical body. There is a psychokinetic effect with visualization. And in the forming of the vision, and then letting it go, it sets into motion actually the forces at a very deep level of psyche, of soul, that make the way and actually make it happen. So this is a technique. Right hand, focus on ordinary consciousness. Request insight and guidance. Left hand, making contact with your greater self. Receive insight, intuition, based on your values and vision. Both hands together. See yourself expressing yourself in this new way. See how you can work with clients doing this as well? But we're going to do it, of course, with ourselves first. If we had longer, I would have you work it with each other. So find a friend at home and play with it maybe and see how it works for you. Okay. So take a moment now just to close your eyes. And start by having your hands just gently relaxed. Use whatever technique you use to ground yourself, to allow your attention to shift inward. Perhaps feel the gentle rise and fall in the chest, like a gentle massage. Relaxing and releasing into the breath. You may even wish to let your chin drop forward to your chest and rotate your head around if you feel any tension in your neck and shoulders. Just breathing gently, inhaling on the up and exhaling on the down. Gently go in both directions. Release. Go at your own pace until you feel complete and bring your head back to center. Relaxing even more. case your body has a response or thoughts or concerns come in, if that's the case, let go of the left hand and focus again on your ordinary consciousness as it seeks to integrate this guidance and insight. Holding your right hand, thumb and forefinger together. Allow the awareness of thoughts and feelings to reveal a new question. How am I to do this? What will support me? Is there perhaps a preparation or something I need that will make it easier for me? Or whatever the appropriate question is that comes from your heart. Request just one single question of your greater self. And as you do, bring the left hand together, thumb and forefinger, releasing the right hand, and receive. Insight. Experience. Thought. Feel it fill your belly, the energy just another moment to finish up. Jotting down notes so you can come back to your notes and add to them.
Yeah.
Just bringing it to a close. You know, I lost the time frame on this because of the starting on things and this joint again. So I'd like to give you a chance to just touch base with a neighbor. Look at what's on your list of where you are, and look at what you received in terms of guidance. Just take a moment to share with your neighbor.
Do they need to pick these up? We need to wait a while. Otherwise, there's a chance that they got your money. Make sure they get the right one.
Well, yeah, I guess I really do. But I I really worked that one. I mean, really,
If you can bring your attention back, I really wish to apologize. I usually really try to keep my stuff on time, and I totally lost track here. So, I betrayed you.
we forgive you.
Pardon me?
Experiential workshop, right? We're not betrayed.
That's right. No, actually, it was both experiential. Hopefully, you've had an experience. Okay, so thank you very much. It's a pleasure to share this information.
Thank you.
Oh, the name of my book again is Journey from Betrayal to Trust. And unfortunately, it wasn't at the bookstore.
Here's my check.
Oh, great.
I want it.
Well, if you want to say questions, I'm happy to deal with questions. There are forms back here.
There are forms back here, sign in, sign out,
Sign in somewhere.
and there's also forms to order.
Yes. Yes.
Now I walk in.
And the healing is
That's okay. Walk away from all you want.
Oh, I gotta sign out.
Maybe end it. Okay.
It's gonna be a Friday.
Okay, thank you.
So you were supposed to do this.
We did,
Everything I hated about him was sticking out in myself, running emergency service. I mean, because that was like what I was doing this. Well, I was on my
Wait,
This is, it was a long time after that I realized I could take those things. Yeah, and that's what I did with Karen. Yeah. I had That's right. Oh, yeah.
Oh, you bet.
So I apologize for you having to.
well, this one was particularly because they distributed a lot of stuff. Yes, if you want to sign out, train both of those.